The divorce papers felt heavier than they should have. Daniel Matthews sat in his empty apartment, a far cry from the four-bedroom house he'd helped build, staring at the final judgment. His ex wife, Jessica, had gotten everything: primary custody of their two kids, Lily and Owen, the house they'd spent 10 years paying off, and 60% of their savings. The judge had been sympathetic to her claims of emotional neglect. His long hours at the engineering firm painted as abandonment rather than provision. What gutted him the most wasn't the money or even the house. It was Thursday nights. He used to come home to Lily practicing piano, her small fingers stumbling over the keys while Owen built elaborate Lego cities on the living room floor. Jessica would be cooking, and despite whatever tension existed between them, those moments felt sacred. Now, Thursday meant microwave dinners in a studio apartment where the neighbors' arguments blend through within walls. The first time he picked up the kids for his court mandated weekend, he saw him, tall, impeccably dressed in clothes that screamed money, standing in Daniel's driveway like he owned it, which in a way he did now. Dad, that's Vincent, Lily had said, pulling her overnight bag toward Daniel's beat up Honda. Mom's boyfriend. He's really nice. He bought us ice cream yesterday. Vincent extended a hand, his smile practiced and perfect. Good to meet you, Daniel. Jessica told me a lot about you. Daniel shook it, feeling the expensive watch press against his wrist, the manicured nails, the confidence of a man who'd never known struggle. I'm sure she has. Don't worry about the kids, Vincent said, his tone dripping with the false camaraderie. I'll take good care of them when they're here. The presumption in those words, when they're here, made Daniel's jaw clench. But he smiled, nodded, and loaded his children into a car that smelled like old coffee instead of a new car scent that probably filled Vincent's luxury sedan. That night, rebuilding began in the smallest of ways. He let Owen pick the pizza toppings, something Jessica never allowed because of her dietary rules. They watched a movie on his laptop since he couldn't afford a TV yet. Lily fell asleep against his shoulder, and for a moment, the apartment didn't feel so empty. But Sunday came too quickly, dropping them back at the house. His house felt like ripping off scab each time. Jessica looked different now, happier, maybe. She wore clothes he'd never seen, designer labels he recognized from billboards. Her hair was professionally styled, her nails done. Vincent's influence was evident in every detail. They behaved? She asked, barely making eye contact. They're great kids, Jess. They always have been. She softened slightly, but Vincent appeared in the doorway behind her, his presence a reminder that Daniel no longer belonged in this picture. Thanks for bringing them back on time, Vincent said, his hand sliding possessively around Jessica's waist. Daniel drove away, watching his former life shrink in the rear mirror, not knowing that the perfect facade was already cracking. The perfect illusion 3 months after the divorce, Jessica Martinez felt like she'd finally escaped the monotony that had defined her marriage. Vincent Ashford wasn't just handsome, he was everything Daniel had not been: attentive, spontaneous, generous to a fault. He'd swept into her life at the gym where she'd started working out to cope with the separation, and within weeks, she'd felt more alive than she had in years. Their first real date had been intoxicating. Vincent took her to a restaurant she'd only read about in magazines, where the waiters knew him by name and the wine list required a sommelier to navigate. He listened when she talked about feeling invisible in her marriage, about Daniel's obsession with work, about the loneliness of being a wife without being seen. You deserve to be worshipped, Vincent had said, his eyes intense over candlelight, not tolerated. The night in the penthouse he claimed to own, she let herself surrender completely. His touch was confident, practiced, knowing exactly where to linger and when to be gentle. The floor to ceiling windows overlooked at the lights as he undressed her slowly, reverently, making her feel like art instead of obligation. Their intimacy was passionate and consuming, so different from Daniel's predictable routine. Vincent made her feel wanted in ways she'd forgotten were possible. But now, lying in bed while Vincent showered, Jessica noticed small things. His phone buzzed constantly, always face down, always silenced. When she asked about his business, his answers were vague: import, export. He'd say consulting work, investments. Nothing concrete enough to pin down. His penthouse, she'd recently learned, was actually a long term Airbnb. She'd found the confirmation email when his laptop was opened. Though he laughed it off, just between properties, baby. Sold my last place for a profit, waiting for the right opportunity. The kids adored him, which should have been comforting. He bought Owen every Lego set he asked for and enrolled Lily in private piano lessons. Jessica could never have afforded that before. But there was something performative about it, like he was playing a role rather than genuinely connecting. Mom, why does Vincent get so many phone calls at night? Lily asked that one night. He's a businessman, sweetheart. Important people need to reach him. But Lily's observation planted a seed of doubt. Vincent did disappear frequently, claiming business emergency that always seemed to arise after dinner. He'd kiss Jessica deeply, promise to return, and vanish for hours. One night she'd waited up. He'd return at 2 a.m., his shirt wrinkled, smelling faintly from a perfume that was not hers. Client dinner ran late, he explained, his smile easy. You know how it is. She didn't, actually, but she wanted to believe him because the alternative, that she traded a boring but stable for something hollow, was too devastating to consider. Her friend Monica had been less convinced. Over coffee, Monica had asked the questions Jessica avoided. Have you met his family? Seen where he works? Met any of his friends? Jessica realized she hadn't. In 4 months, Vincent's life existed only in the spaces he shared with her. Everything else was mystery, smoke, and mirrors she'd been too infatuated to see through. That week, she made a decision. While Vincent showered after one of their passionate evenings together, she took his phone. Her hands trembled as she bypassed a simple password, her birthday, which had felt romantic before, and opened his messages. What she found made her blood run cold. Multiple women's names, conversations that mirrored their own relationships' early days, terms of endearment identical to the ones he used with her, promises made to the people whose faces she didn't know. And then she saw the banking apps, not accounts in Vincent Ashford's names, but in the names she didn't recognize. Daniel noticed the change in Jessica's before she has said anything. When he picked up the kids the following weekend, she looked tired in a way designer clothes couldn't hide. The confidence Vincent had brought to her demeanor had dimmed, replaced by something haunted. Everything okay? He asked, genuinely concerned despite everything. Fine, she said quickly, but her eyes told a different story. Just work stress. But it wasn't work. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel pieced together fragments from what the kids inadvertently shared. Vincent had stopped staying over as frequently. There had been a loud discussion that sent Lily to her room with headphones. Owen mentioned that Vincent had promised to take them to Disneyland, but the trip kept getting postponed. Daniel's curiosity evolved into concern when Lily said, Dad, why does Vincent have different names? What do you mean, honey? Someone called him Mr. Castellano at a restaurant, but mom calls him Vincent Ashford, and his mail says V. Torres. Daniel engineering mind trained to identify patterns and problems kicked into gear. That evening after the kids were asleep, he did what he probably shouldn't have. He started digging. Vincent Ashford had almost no digital footprints, no LinkedIn, no professional website, no business registration, but Vincent Torres had a history, a small time con artist from Nevada with outstanding warrants. And V. Castellano appeared in several lawsuits filed by women claiming fraud. Daniel's hands shook as he compiled the information. Part of him wanted to let Jessica suffer the consequences of her own choices. She'd left him with nothing, believing Vincent's illusion of wealth were superior to their modest but real life together. But the kids were involved now. His kids. He called Jessica. We need to talk about Vincent. Daniel, I don't need your. He's not who he says he is, Jess. I found records, court documents. He's using at least three different names. Silence stretched between them. Finally, her voice came through, small and broken. I know. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory, where old wounds and new revelations could be examined without the weight of their shared history pressing down. Jessica looked fragile in a way he'd never seen during their marriage. I found texts, she admitted, other women, but I thought maybe I was overreacting, being paranoid. The money started disappearing from my account, small amounts at first. He said he needed to cover an unexpected expense, that his funds were temporarily tied up. I believed him. How much, Jess? 30,000 so far. Her voice cracked. From the divorce settlement, from what was supposed to secure the kids' future, Daniel felt anger surge, but not at her, at the predator who targeted his vulnerable ex-wife. We need to go to police. With what evidence? He's been careful. It looks like I gave him permission for everything. And if this becomes public, Daniel, the kids will know. Everyone will know. I know I was stupid. You weren't stupid. You were lonely, and he's a professional. Daniel reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. But we end this now, together. That night, they formed an unlikely alliance. Jessica provided access to her financial records, screenshots of messages before Vincent had deleted them. Daniel used his methodical nature to organize everything into a timeline that revealed the pattern, but Vincent wasn't finished with them yet. When he realized Jessica has frozen him out of her accounts, his charming mask slipped completely. He showed up at the house, Daniel's old house, drunk and belligerent. Jessica called Daniel in panic. He's outside, banging on the door. The kids are terrified. I called the police, but lock yourself and the kids in your bedroom. I'm 10 minutes away. Daniel broke every traffic law getting there, arriving just as Vincent kicked in front door. What happened next was instinct. Daniel's body moving before his mind caught up, tackling Vincent to the ground as sirens approached in the distance. You ruined everything. Vincent spat, his practiced accent gone, replaced by something crudder. She was mine. The money was mine. She was never yours, Daniel said, pinning him down, and you're done. The police station's fluorescent lights felt like judgment. Jessica sat across from Detective Rodriguez, Daniel beside her for support. A strange reversal of the courtroom where they'd officially ended their marriage. Miss Martinez, walk me through the timeline again, Rodriguez said, her pen poised over a notepad. Jessica recounted everything, the whirlwind romance, the inconsistencies she'd ignored, the money transferred Vincent had convinced her were investments. Her voice remained steady until she reached the part about her children being home when they broke down the door. He could have heard them. She whispered, all because I was too proud to see what was right in front of me. Daniel shifted his seat, his presence a quiet reassurance despite everything she'd put him through. He'd showed up. He always showed up. Vincent, or whoever he really was, sat in an interrogation room down the hall. His real name, they discovered, was Victor Torres Castellano, a career con artist with warrants in 3 states. The soft business persona was just his latest character, redefined through years of targeting divorced women with assets. We've identified 6 other victims in the region alone, Rodriguez explained. Your documentation helped us build a solid case. He won't make bail this time, but the damage was done. Jessica's savings, money that was supposed to cover college funds, emergency reserve security, was largely gone. Victor had been clever, mixing legitimate seeming investments with outright theft, making recovery unlikely. Driving home from police station, Jessica finally broke down. I destroyed everything. The house is gone because I refinanced to invest with him. The kids' college funds are decimated, and I dragged you into this mess after I already, her voice caught, after I already blamed you for everything wrong in our marriage. Daniel pulled into a parking lot, letting her cry. When she finally quieted, he spoke carefully. You didn't destroy everything. The kids are safe. You woke up before it got worse. And Jess, our marriage had problems long before Vincent. I was not innocent in that. She looked at him, really looked. Perhaps for the first time in years, the man she'd painted as emotionally distant and obsessed with work had dropped everything to protect her and their children from her own mistakes. The stability she'd found boring had been real in a way Vincent's excitement never was. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. One step at a time. First, we figure out the financial damage, then we focus on making the kids feel secure again. Over the following weeks, they worked together more efficiently than they'd had during their marriage. Daniel helped Jessica meet with a financial advisor and a lawyer about asset recovery. She started therapy, unpacking not just the trauma of Vincent's deception, but the dissatisfaction that had made her vulnerable to it. The kids noticed the change. At their next custody exchange, Owen hugged Daniel extra tight, then did something unexpected. He hugged Jessica too, bringing them together in an awkward triangle. I like it when you and mom don't fight, he said simply. Lily, older and more perceptive, added, are we going to be okay? Daniel and Jessica exchanged a look. Yes, they said together. We're going to be okay. One evening, after a particularly different day, sorting through financial wreckage, Jessica invited Daniel to stay for dinner in what used to be his house. It felt strange but not uncomfortable. She'd cooked his favorite meal, a peace offering wrapped in a pasta and garlic bread. After the kids went to bed, they sat on the porch with coffee, something they hadn't done in years. I owe you an apology, Jessica said, a real one, not just for Vincent, but for how I ended things between us. I blamed you for my every single unhappiness instead of recognizing my own part in it. I painted you as the villain when you were just human. I wasn't present enough. Daniel admitted, I thought providing was the same as participating. I let work become an excuse to avoid dealing with us. We both did the wrong thing, but Daniel, you showed up when I needed you the most, even after I took everything from you. Why? He considered the question, watching moths circle the porch light. Because the kids needed their mom safe, and because underneath all the hurt, I never stopped caring about you. 6 months after Vincent's arrest, Jessica stood in her kitchen, the kitchen that would soon belong to someone else. The foreclosure had been inevitable once the refinancing disaster came to light, but she'd made peace with it. Material things could be replaced. Trust, safety, and family were what matters. Daniel arrived to help with packing, something he'd never volunteered for despite the awkwardness. They developed a strange but functional co parenting friendship built on brutal honesty and mutual respect. The kids excited about the new place? He asked, taping up the boxes. Surprisingly, yes. It's smaller, but it's ours. No ghosts, no bad memories. She paused. Daniel, I've been thinking. The custody arrangement, I want to modify it. His expressions shuddered. Jess, if this is about money, it's about fairness. You should have kids half the time, 50-50. You're an incredible father, and I used the courts to punish you for not being what I wanted you to be. That was wrong. Daniel sat down, the tape, emotion flickering across his face. You mean that? I do. I've spent 6 months in therapy understanding why I made the choices I did. I was chasing an illusion of passion because our marriage felt stale. But passion without foundation is just performance. You gave us foundation. I should have worked with you to add passion instead of burning everything down. They stood in their kitchen where they shared thousands of meals, good mornings and good nights, arguments and reconciliations. The history between them was complicated, but it was real. I don't want to go back together, Jessica clarified. We both need to figure out who we are separately, but I want us to be actual partners in raising our kids, not opponents. I'd like that, Daniel said softly. The following weeks brought change. Jessica moved into a modest townhouse, started a new job that paid less but gave her purpose, and continued therapy. Daniel got promoted at work and used the raise to create better space for the kids in his apartment. Now, truly a home. Their first 50-50 exchange happened on a Tuesday. Jessica kissed the kids goodbye, watching them run to Daniel's car without the usual tears and reluctance. Call me if you need anything, she told him. Same goes for you. It wasn't romance. It wasn't the fairy tale she once imagined or the passionate illusion Vincent had sold. It was something quieter, but infinitely more valuable. Two imperfect people choosing to do better for children they created together. 3 months later, Jessica went on her first post Vincent date. a colleague from work, kind and steady, who knew about her past and didn't flinch. It was pleasant and unremarkable. She was okay with that. Unremarkable meant safe. It was real. Daniel, meanwhile, focused on himself. He started running again, joined a recreational basketball league, and attended a support group for divorced fathers. He wasn't looking for replacement for Jessica. He learned to be complete on his own. The kids thrived with the new arrangements. Lily's piano playing improved with the emotional stability. Owen built increasingly complex Lego creations that sprawled across both homes. They learned that love didn't require perfection, just presence. On Thanksgiving, something unexpected happened. Daniel's family invited Jessica to join them, a gesture of reconciliation that made her tear up. She brought wine and pumpkin pie, sitting at a table with her ex husband's relatives who treated her with warmth despite everything. After dinner, Daniel walked her to the car. "Thank you for coming," he said. "It meant a lot to the kids. Thank you for inviting me over. Your family didn't have to be so gracious. They saw what I saw. Someone who made mistakes but owned them. That takes courage, Jess." She smiled, tears threatening. We both got a second chance, not just with each other, but at being better versions of ourselves. "I'll drink to that," Daniel said, raising an imaginary glass. As Jessica drove home, she thought about the journey from her lowest point, believing Vincent's lies, losing everything, to this moment of quiet gratitude. The perfect man had been a marriage, and the imperfect reality of co parenting with Daniel, of rebuilding her life brick by brick, was solid ground. She'd walked away with the kids and savings, chasing an illusion. The truth about Vincent had nearly destroyed her, but in the ruins, she'd found something unexpected: redemption, respect, and the understanding that real love, whether romantic or familial, was built through choices made every day, not grand gestures or expensive promises. The house was gone, the money was gone. Vincent was in prison, but her children were safe, sleeping soundly in their beds, and for the first time in years, that was enough.